Corona TV viewers. I'm Johnny Damon.
You're my bobblehead Joel today, just nod up and down if you agree. Welcome to the show, Mitch Joel. How are you?
Happy birthday to you.
And just look at those washboard abs.
I know, right? Oh yeah, this is the fittest I've ever been in my life, you know.
Happy birthday from Johnny Damon.
First of all, let's just do the elbow bump. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Friday. It is National Friday Day today, and it is the wonderful community shows. Today, I think even better than previous weeks, 4 guests, and I think this might be the sweet spot. I also like things that that kind of balance, even though when there are 5 of us on screen, it'll be kind of a little bit different. But I like the fact that people can talk more, because these community shows have just been amazing. They really have been. They've been profound. They've been deep. And there's no reason why it won't be the same today. I'm going to mix things up slightly today, which is just bring them on straight away, starting with the nicest guy in the business, Mr. Dave Delaney. See?
Hey, Joe.
See how nice he is? Mr. Scott Monty, equally nice.
I try.
Welcome, Tricia, Benn. You are a regular now, which I absolutely love. You took me up on the monthly offer, and I love that. And Scott, you've been pretty regular too. Welcome, Tricia.
Great to be here. And I'm Canadian, so I think I have nice, really, patent in my DNA.
Well, unfortunately, the niceness had to end with Aaron Strout. But you know what? We can't all be perfect. My brother, welcome back.
Thank you, Joseph. Good to see you.
It's a great opportunity just to even hang out together, and see each other, because we don't get to do that often. So I thought it would be kind of nice to bring all of you on and start off by having you guys as the co-hosts rather than have you sit in the background. So we're going to do that right now. We're going to start off with the fact that I don't know if you guys have been watching. I'm sure you have been. In fact, I know you have been. You must have been. Perseverance has landed on Mars, and we're basically seeing incredible riveting images of what looks like, I don't know, rocks and sand and no water, but still, Perseverance has not given up. And I really love the Twitter account, and I don't know why, it connects with me, this inanimate, animated, humanized bot saying, I'm safe on Mars, Perseverance will get you anywhere. Never been, true words have never been said. So I'm going to welcome you all officially. You are now my co-hosts, and ask you all the same question, which is, if you could go to Mars, would you? Why or why not? Starting with Mr. Dave Delaney.
Well, Joe, that's a great question. I think I would, I'd probably give it a pass.
So this time, you're not going to go on Virgin Mars Galactic or anything?
Not so much, no. I think, I really like Earth. It's pretty cool. I haven't seen it all yet, so I'd love to see some more of Earth. So probably stick here. I'm kind of like the really super scary roller coasters. I love to watch my family ride those. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Well, hence the name of the show today, When Hell Freezes Over.
Right.
Oh, it already did, which is when Texas is freezing, we know it's time to go to Mars. Scott, what about you? Would you go to Mars? If so, why? And if not, why not?
Yeah, sure. I would go to Mars because I love potatoes. No, they don't actually have potatoes on Mars.
They do. They do. Those are potatoes, by the way.
They might be. Who knows? They do, however, have Sherlock on Mars. So that would be an attractive thing for me. Part of the Perseverance expedition there includes scanning habitable environments with Raman and luminescence for organics and chemicals, which is shortened to Sherlock. And
there you go.
It on the rover's robotic arm. So that alone is enough to attract me to Mars.
Wow, elementary, my dear Monty. Now we have Tricia, Benn. Tricia, are you ready to give up your community that you've built here to go to Mars?
Well, Joseph, you know, I am a huge believer in community. With C-Suite Network, it is all about community. And the reason that I am truly inspired as we continue to scale like crazy is because I live vicariously through those that I admire, respect, and love. So I don't need to go to Mars, if you know what I'm saying. So I am so thrilled to cheer, celebrate, and absolutely learn from everybody who will go to Mars and all of the perseverance it's taken to get there, and obviously everything that we discover in the future. So I am excited to be one of the supporters of all kinds of different adventures. So that probably wouldn't be me as the best candidate, but I have lots of great leaders that I know are exceptional and will be bringing all the best of that experience back to us.
And Aaron Strout, I have a nice one-way ticket to Mars for you, my friend. Will you take it?
I would go to Mars in a heartbeat. I don't know about the one way, but my family would not be happy with me. But it is something I would love to do. I love space. I love exploration. Unlike Dave, I am the person that's the first in line on the roller coaster. And I would like to say, by the way, like we have at least 3 OGers here. I was looking through LinkedIn this morning for some research. Tricia, it's nice to meet you. I don't think we've officially crossed paths, but Dave, Scott, who's one of my original Boston OGers, you know, it's been a long time. I think it's been 13-ish years that we've all been connected on Twitter and other social networks. So it's good to see everyone this morning.
Isn't it? It is great. And that's what I tried to do, to get us all together again, and, you know, old friends, new friends, etc. Well, today is Prevent Plagiarism Day, which probably, you know, I mean, I'm sure we could all talk to that as well. I'm probably plagiarizing by stealing this image off Google. But you know, it's a challenge, right? I mean, it's a challenge that ultimately, when we try and create content and curate content, how to truly be original. I feel like the OGers understand attribution and understand how to deal with this stuff in a public content or creator world. But I'm not sure if some of the newbies do.
Yeah, you know, Joe, it's a really important thing to revisit. And I know Kerry Gargone in particular talks a lot about legal issues in social media. And, you know, people who haven't been, you know, let's say digital natives, right? People who haven't discovered their way into the digital space like a lot of us OGers have. Just think, because it's on the internet, you can take it. And you can get yourself into some pretty deep trouble that way with litigious folks who, you know, want to claim what's rightfully theirs. You know, if someone creates something and puts it out and doesn't append some sort of Creative Commons license to it, it doesn't mean you can go ahead and take it. And, you know, for my own newsletter, that's why I resorted to using old paintings. I know none of these guys are still alive and will come after me, nor will their families. So it's a safe zone.
See, always one step ahead. And there's a little blast from the past. CC does not just stand for CC Chapman, it also stands for Creative Commons. We don't see that little CC and circle much these days, do we?
We really don't. I think about like PodSafe music too, and things like that. Like back in the early days when we all started podcasting and things like that, that, you know, you would be looking for music to include on your show. And so you'd always be looking for PodSafe music. And I don't even think that, I don't hear the term PodSafe very often as far as music goes anymore. So, but yeah, Creative Commons, man. I was just uploading some stuff today to Flickr because I have one of those digital frames in my house.
There's another one you don't hear much of.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's true. But I have a digital frame at home, and it automatically populates from private albums on Flickr, so family photos and things. And but as I was uploading, I'm like, nope, not Creative Commons, because I don't want people nipping and taking my family photos.
By the way, I get my music now from Epidemic Sound, which is based in Sweden. So they have no beef with Will Ferrell or General Motors these days. But that's where I've been finding my music. $15 a month. This episode brought to you by Epidemic Sound. But anyway, I digress. Mr. Tom Morris says, Scott Monty is smart. One reason I steal from the ancient philosophers is that they're strangely quiet about taking their work, no suits at all, ever. By the way, every time Tom quotes a philosopher, I keep saying could you please make an introduction? I would love to have them on the show. He has never made an introduction yet. So whatever. All right. So what else can we do just before we get into this week's show? And there's a lot of cool stuff. Give you guys a sense of who our guests are next week. Rose Cameron, Donnie Salazar, Julie Rame, and Chris Fuller. They are the guests in the hot seat in the studio. And then a community show on Friday. I'm sure you guys don't know any of these people. Melanie Diesel, Brian Solis, Bob Norp, and Kuda Biza. They will be back on our community show. Let's do birthdays very quickly. You guys know anyone on this list? If so, you can say happy birthday to them. These are my Facebook friends, but they can be your Facebook friends too. Stephen Verbruchen. Do you guys know anyone on this list?
I think Randy Myers is the only one I know.
Yeah, so no degrees of Kevin Bacon or Joseph Jaffe.
Alex de Carvalho.
There you go. Well, so now you get,
Yep.
and I think you guys know Drew Nasser, and Kate Kendall maybe, and Samantha Conyers. Well, happy birthday to you guys. I just thought it'd be nice to do a little bit of a communal hello to all of you, and happy birthday to all of you. All right, so let's get into the show. That is something different. I thought it'd be nice to bring you all on and to do that. One of the things that we're going to do this time is, as some of you know, is talk about our Corona bites. And then I'm actually going to turn to my guests and ask them a question about it. So the first guest that's up is Dave Delaney. But before we get to him, the Corona bite on Monday comes from my friend Sean Finnegan. And he, we started getting into this whole idea of flipped events, flipped conferences, flipped classrooms. This was the bite.
I saw the complete need for an inversion of the ratio of an event. It's sold to these publishers and technology companies, basically saying, hey, there's this CMO of this Fortune 100 brand is going to be there. And so you should, come and buy a sponsorship. And then you get to the event, and the CMO like runs up on stage and runs out and gets, and suddenly it's a whole sales feeding fest. I feel bad for the vendors because they're sitting there investing their time and resources. They're looking for an ROI. On the flip side, having friends in the brand space, they are genuinely there to the good ones to learn about a new business model, to actually apply that if it makes sense for their business. But they can't because they're just being inundated with the volume of sellers. Thus was born the room.
There is this concept called the flipped classroom. And I actually see the flipped conferences and flipped events happening as well. So Dave, how do you see conferences and events taking shape or shaping out in this new normal or business as unusual post-COVID?
Yeah, it's a good question. And as a speaker, I really hope we get back to doing it in person, before too long, or it's already been too long at this point. I think people are clamoring to get back together. In fact, I know they are. And I think now is a good time to be thinking about, as a conference organizer or an event planner, now is a good time to start planning, events for the future where we can get back together again. I mean, I think it's coming. I think people will be more cautious. I don't know if we'll be doing so many hugs and high fives and handshakes as we were before, probably more toe taps and elbow bumps. But I think we will be getting back together again. I just think it's going to be a matter of time right now.
I still believe, by the way, that what's going to really happen is a keynoter will pre-record their speech. This is my prediction, not always, but in some cases. And within 24 hours of the event, that speech will be unlocked. And so if you're flying to an event, you can actually watch them highly produced, without with multimedia that's working, etc. And then they'll come to the event. But now, instead of seeing a performance on stage, because not everyone is a great performer, they'll do a Q&A or something a little bit more interactive. And that's maybe how the event may be flipped on its head.
Yeah, I think intimacy is important with these events. I mean, that's where true relationships are born, is when you can connect with one another. I've always been a big fan, in most cases, maybe excluding South by Southwest, which is a little different, but of course that's one that, we have all hung out at. But I think the single track conferences to me have always been the best, only because they are shared experiences, so that everybody there are all experiencing the same speaker at the same time, so that everybody can talk about those sessions. They all have those commonalities. So straight away, whether you're extroverted or whether you're introverted, whatever, you all have a point to talk about. You have the specific presenter to talk about. So when I wrote, that's why I wrote a lot about conferences in my book, New Business Networking, all about going to conferences and meeting people. And, some of you are in my book. So there you go. That's an example of that.
All right. But that is not what is actually on your mind and what you're going to be talking about. Your 5-minute segment begins as soon as I take my handy dandy trusted egg timer, which always seems to run out and people continue to talk. So I don't even know why I do this. But anyway, it starts now. So, well, to back to the video clip. I mean, I think the point was, and if I understood it correctly, flipping these events on their side, Joe. So maybe be a little more clear on that one for me. Is what you're saying with the idea of a recorded video, for example, that you mentioned, is that what you were talking about? Because I'm not totally clear. Yeah, no, absolutely. What I was saying is that I actually think that the flipped classroom itself is, instead of the lecturer giving the lesson in the classroom and homework being done at home, it flips on its head. So now the lecture is given while you're at home, and in the classroom, you're actually doing the homework. It's much more interactive, discursive, experiential. But just to be clear, we can continue talking about this or whatever your topic is. I'm happy to do either.
Well, I think
people do.
What's that?
People change it. People come in wanting to talk about something and then they talk about something else. That's totally fine too.
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting concept of, if I'm understanding, of watching a video and then coming together in person to discuss that. To me personally, I don't think that will fly so well. I really do believe in the intimacy of conferences and events, right? So, part of what you're paying for when you go to a conference is the content, is the speaker. So to watch a video beforehand and not actually get that experience in person, I think there's a big missed opportunity there. And as a presenter myself, I mean, what my role is to, educate and improve and inspire and entertain the audience as well. So for me, when I'm on stage speaking to audiences, I mean, part of my goal is to get them, revved up and to give them a good time and give them points to talk to each other and kind of empower them that way. So I don't really understand the idea, or I understand it, but I don't really think that will fly. I think what we're looking for now, or, as we come out of or on the other side of this pandemic, is an opportunity to reconvene together again and to be able to share what we learned from the speaker, but then able to network and meet one another. Because that's the other side, right? The selling point of going to a conference is to see the content. But the truth we all know is that the bulk of the best stuff that happens at conferences is actually networking. So it's actually meeting one another and establishing relationships, which is why, I've got a website called networkingfornicepeople.com. And on that website, I talk a lot, and in my book, I talk a lot about the importance of the 3 key things about networking, which is 1, show up, which we're all here today and you're watching this at home. 2 is to follow up. So to follow up with the people you meet, including the speakers. And then finally, catch up, which means every 6 or 12 months or whatever, set it on your calendar to catch up with people before that next event. And so typically, I would set reminders on my calendar that, let's say I was going to South by Southwest again next year, then I would catch up with these guys to say, hey, I'm going to be at South by this year. Are you going to be there? And to catch up. So I think that's the 3 key points about networking at conferences as it goes. So.
What do the rest of you think in terms of what the future of events and conferences might look like? Closer you closer to what I was saying, or maybe there's a hybrid approach? I'd love to hear what you're thinking.
We're absolutely planning for the total hybrid model, because the fact of the matter is what's happened over the last year has taught us, and we host over 300 digital events a year. Prior to that, we held well over 100 in person, from cocktails through to full retreats and main stage, conferences, several day conferences. But I think as we go forward, the creativity of how we connect digitally is so critically important, and we do not plan to go backwards on that. So I really believe in a hybrid model of we'll have closer, more intimate experiences in person, and we'll be digitally including and really with feeling emotion and connection, the whole digital community around everything we do in person as well. So I couldn't be more excited at the C-Suite Network. We couldn't be more excited for what that all looks like. And the fact that we're all forced to sit in the position of being the outsider, we sit in our own spaces. So please include me, right? And now it's all of us. It's not just one person who couldn't happen to make it in, or the keynoter whose plane got canceled or something like that. So I couldn't be more excited. I absolutely believe in the hybrid model. And the fact of the matter is we all know now, and if you don't, and I want to talk about community in my 5 minutes, Joseph, but if you don't, you're missing out, because the community engagement is just extraordinary when you're tapped into that right community for you.
It's by the way why I decided to do these Friday shows, because I suddenly look back at 205 now guests, and already you take Aaron Strout and myself, weeks have gone by or months go by where you don't actually get just to look at each other face to face and to Dave's point, catch up. And so I realized I don't like the one and done approach. I don't like someone coming on the show and then they're done. And so these Fridays have been joys for me. Scott and Aaron, what do you guys think about the future of events?
Yeah, Joe, I think that hybrid is what we're going to see, just as Tricia was saying. And I think what Dave said before, that the importance or the uniqueness that we get out of conferences being the places where we meet people, the serendipitous hallway conversations. These are the things that we're missing. I mean, yeah, you can have a serendipitous conversation with somebody on Twitter, maybe on Clubhouse now, but it's not the same. It's not the same as seeing someone face to face, having that trusted conversation. So you can dispense with the necessity of being there for a keynote or even for a breakout session, because those are the kinds of things that can be packaged and sent out separate from the physical conference itself. But you absolutely cannot replicate that human-to-human contact.
And by the way, the official first Clubhouse mention was at 23 minutes on the show. Normally it's me. I was biting my tongue. I have a feeling we might be talking about that in your segment. I think it's a great conversation. We've got to keep thinking about it and talking about it. I do want to just say one more point before we do move on to Scott. And first of all, the Corona Bite. Dave, you have your past and you have a lot of equity in improv, and recognizing that when you give a speech or a keynote, it should be a performance. You should be thinking of yourself and of this delivery as a performance. Hopefully, when we come out of this, people will take that seriously and not just be a talking head staring at a laptop, hiding behind a lectern or podium, but really be able to deliver, that experiential delivery.
I take that very seriously even now as a speaker, because I'm doing virtual workshops, I'm doing trainings, I'm doing virtual keynotes. So I'm doing everything virtually speaking. But of course, part of the performance is just doing it in new creative ways. So sometimes I'll weave in a magic trick, or sometimes I'll find new ways to get people to interact, like in the comments, or raising their hands, or lifting a colored card to indicate something or other. So I have different ways that the difference is when you are presenting virtually, you have to try to engage the audience. So otherwise, and you have all been on the other end of that, where you're kind of bored on a webinar, lunch and learn thing, and you get distracted by your phone or something. So making sure that the audience is engaged is such a key thing. And you can see that in the chat, but you can't see that, as opposed to being on stage, you can see if people are shifting around or they're looking bored or God forbid they're leaving the room. Unless it's an unconference, of course, the law of 2 feet apply there. I think it's very important that as a speaker, focusing on the delivery of the content is key.
And look at my little magic tricks, how I can make people just turn around and walk around the room. All right, well, we're going to get into Tuesday's guest. I have to say, what a pleasure it was to meet Ann Janzer. I think this is also a perfect Corona bite for Scott, who will respond to the bite and then take a bite out of his own segment. So here is the segment on servant authorship.
And I asked people about, their motivations for writing. And what happens is, as you know, Joseph, as you've written books, you don't just have the one motivation, right? We have multiples of them. And what surprised me was that 80% of these business authors said that serving others was one of their important motivations. And for 40%, it was their primary. So what I'm suggesting with servant authorship is that you try to boost that up and keep that as your primary motivation, because it's going to protect you from annoying your audience, annoying your readers. It's going to make the work better. It's going to make your decisions easier. The reader owes us nothing. The reader owes us nothing. It's that, their time, our time on this earth is limited. And when you hand someone a book, you're saying, here, I want you to spend 3, 4, 5, 6 hours of your time with this. That's an ask.
By the way, it's so funny to me how these bites are under 1 minute. They're 50 seconds, but that felt like an entire episode of insights. And then we do these shows, and I'm looking at the time. I'm like, we're almost at 30 minutes, and how the time flies when we're actually having a conversation. It's just a very unique, distended view sometimes of time. But Scott, I'll let you respond to the bite and then go straight into naturally your segment. You've been doing, I think, practice servant authorship big time, prototype for it, if you will, poster child, in terms of how much care and consideration you put into your newsletters. You really do write works of art. So what do you think about what Anne was saying? And then ultimately, at some point, you can just talk about your segment today.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that, Joe. And I've shared my screen here if you want to pop that up, because this is what I picture you doing every time I'm on, with your little your little hourglass there.
You just reminded me actually to turn it. So you had unlimited time before. Green with envy.
Yes, indeed. Well, no. So thank you for that kind introduction. And look, I think what Anne was talking about, servant authorship, it dovetails perfectly with servant leadership. Every time I would talk to Alan Mullally, the CEO at Ford, and talk about the things that we are accomplishing, his great leadership, compliment him on the progress we were making on the Ford plan, he would always turn it around and say, Scott, it's an honor to serve. And he would say, remember, to serve is to live. And that's actually a quote from Francis Hesselbein, the founder of, or an early CEO of the Girl Scouts. And the notion is, what are we doing to give back to others? It's awfully easy in this attention economy to keep pointing to ourselves. But what are we doing to actually contribute to the community? Either to put some thought starters out there. And Joe, I think this is exactly what you've been doing for the last year with Corona TV, with every single guest you've got on. It's not about you. I mean, you're the one who brings everyone together, but you ask great questions. You get people excited about a topic and you start conversations. And what does that do? It benefits the community at large. Now, the side benefit is those of us who are fortunate enough to be on here, we get to bask in the glow of the light that everyone else is putting out, right? So there's intelligence by association. And in my own newsletter, what I like to do is I like to get people to think about what's going on today in today's society and how we can learn from things that happened in the past. Why? Because that can actually get us maybe 2 steps ahead of the game rather than simply making the same mistakes over and over again. So really it's about contributing to the world around you and helping advance a cause, helping advance an individual, helping advance someone other than yourself.
I appreciate those kind words, and that's why Anne's words affected me so much. This idea of being a servant, in everything you do. And so I just want to say thank you. All right. Well, now the Wicked Witch is going to turn over the hourglass. And Bob says, by the way, the flying monkeys scare me to this day. And Aaron Strout, who apparently it's a different Aaron Strout, says, Tom, me too. I always love it when someone is on the show and they're commenting on the show. It's very meta. But anyway, Scott, your 5 minutes starts now.
Oh, right. So here's the thing. This week, speaking of community, I wanted to think a little bit about Clubhouse and where Clubhouse came from. I mean, it's been around for nearly a year or so. I've been on since August. I dropped out for a while because it wasn't quite my thing, but I've rediscovered it thanks to friends and other people are in there who are doing thoughtful curation. And it reminded me of the origins of Clubland in London, these grand old gentlemen's clubs. Not the kind of gentlemen's clubs you're thinking about, Joseph. I'm talking about these old buildings where people would be with leather chairs and libraries, and they used to be exclusive to gentlemen. And by the time the 20th century rolled around, it was opened up to both genders. These are hives where people can find like-minded people and share in what they enjoy together, whether it's the arts or literature or politics or business or whatever it may be. Those were actually founded out of coffee houses. The coffee house came to London in the mid 1600s, and it was a public place where people could gather, and they were called penny universities in some instances, where people paid a penny to get in, and they would hear lectures, and they would debate things, and they would hear people read from the newspaper, because newspapers weren't in wide circulation at that point. So it was a public square. It was a place for people to learn and a place to congregate. And what ended up happening in London life, as you know, status and class were everything. And they began to separate and form their own clubs, these gentlemen's clubs that later went out and formed. And it's just interesting to me that we've seen the same pattern happen over and over again. The early adopters get to these platforms. We have our own conversations. We get skeeved out when the general public gets in there because they've ruined what we thought was a perfect kind of situation. And then we go off and form our own exclusive enclaves, either with a blue check mark or private rooms or what have you. And I think Clubhouse is actually getting a balance of this right from the get-go, because they actually have rooms and events and spaces where people can congregate around a topic and find each other that way. So it's just an interesting development of what we've seen in the past happening once again on a new platform.
We're actually going to do our after show in Clubhouse today because it makes sense. All of us are on Clubhouse, and if you want to join us, we're going to be doing that at about 1 p.m. So come and experience it for yourself, or just come and hang out with us and chat in audio. There's no question, Scott, that in my opinion, this was one of those moments where if it had not been COVID, Clubhouse would not have exploded as it did. But in terms of an idea whose time has come, absolutely, social audio, or drop-in audio, as Jeremiah would call it, I absolutely think that is an idea whose time has come.
Yeah, and here's the thing, Joe. One of the things that turned me off from Clubhouse early on was the time suck. Because it's all real time, you have to be there and you have to dedicate time to it. There's no asynchronicity about it. And, as we've all gone through the pandemic, as we've all got Zoom fatigue now, you know what? I actually prefer it. It's one where you don't have to give your undivided attention. You can be multitasking if you want. You don't have to be on camera. You can do it from your car. And Jeremiah, I think, really nailed it in his report on the social audio industry. He said, social audio is the Goldilocks medium. Text is not enough, and video is too much, and audio is just right.
I've been stewing on that for a while, obviously, because here we are in video. Here you are in newsletter as well, and yet, of course, I'm also sampling all three porridges, I guess, at the same time. I don't know how it's all going to net out. I will say one thing about content. I do believe that video is the way to create content, which then can be split and sliced and diced and transcribed and turned into every other medium and every other form and format. But yeah, I thought that Goldilocks analogy was fantastic. Anybody else want to jump in before we move on?
I've been finding Clubhouse pretty interesting too, actually. I've been enjoying it. But I do find, as to Scott's point, the time suck. It's finding the right people to follow is important, and then joining the right rooms is important. Because otherwise, yeah, it can be a great massive time suck. So I do encourage people to make sure that you're listening to the right rooms to get the most out of it.
And clearly the room with us will not be a time suck at 1 p.m.
That's right.
It will be the right room to be in. And, Dave, one of the things that actually drew me back was our good friend Mitch Joel, also a friend of the program here, who posted on other platforms what he was going to be talking about and who he was going to be inviting in as his co-panelists, much like Joe does here. Right? Give people, set expectations, give people a sense as to what they're going to experience when they get there, much like you would in a conference, right? I think this social audio is much more akin to a social conference than anything else. You've got your keynotes where people are just going to listen. You've got your panel discussions where other people get invited up to the stage or up to the microphone. And then you've got your hallway conversations, the serendipitous things that just happen. I think there's a place for all of those and a way for us to kind of gauge our expectation and our participation based on what we want out of it at any given time.
This is assuming you have access to speak.
Right.
Because that's the problem with Clubhouse is if you are not a speaker, or if you're not like the guest or hosting something, then you're just there in the audience of these different rooms, and you can raise your hand virtually and hope to be picked to be able to speak. Right. So I think that's where some of the time suck is not having the ability to speak, because then you're not meeting anyone, you're just listening. And then on the flip side of that, I think it's, to my points about the value in networking properly, doing it nicely, is being able to follow up. And that's where it's very important, because Clubhouse rooms, these conversations disappear afterwards. They're not recorded, at least not yet. So if they disappear suddenly, then how do you follow up with the people you just met? So it's extremely important that you make sure that you're following.
How do you follow up? How do you follow up, and how do you catch up?
Exactly.
I mean, these are things we can definitely carry over into our room. But the one thing that just struck me is, when you watch CNN and Michael Smerconish, he'll be taking comments from Facebook, from Twitter, et cetera. We may very well, going back to your topic as well, Dave, see that conferences then will take a comment from Twitter, maybe an audio call from Clubhouse. So it just gives us yet another option to create this new hybrid approach. Well, Tricia, we're going to hand off to you in a second, but on Wednesday, Lodro Rinzler was back. I love it when a guest comes back in an official capacity. He has a new book out, and he really spoke. It was the first time I ever meditated with him, because that's what he practices. And we were talking about meditation, and I said to him, I don't know that it's worked for me, that I've had this moment of epiphany and Zen, etc. But he really talks about how to understand a moment of peace, a moment of happiness, and how to build on that, especially in the sea of sometimes pain, confusion, ambiguity, noise, etc. Here was the bite.
there's something about just even taking these little moments. I mean, you're putting yourself down a little bit of like, oh, there's no great epiphany, there's no great peace, but a little moment of peace is actually pretty huge. And I think our job is essentially to give the instruction and to hold people's hands long enough that they start to say, oh, there's a gap there where for a moment I was just able to rest and just feel the body breathing. And that was nice enough. And maybe that's this whole peaceful thing that they're always talking about. And in that moment, it's no longer a Lodro Rinzler sitting there telling them about it. It's their own experience. And if they had that experience once, they could have it twice. If they have it twice, they could have it for a minute. And then we start to deepen our relationship to peace. So it becomes sort of a continuity of peace as opposed to, we often see this in the movie, like some great ecstatic, like laser beams shoot out of the eyeballs and, the sun radiates in all directions from our forehead. It's a little bit more subtle than that.
It's not an epiphany, it's a miniphany. That was my word, not an epiphany, but a miniphany, a mini epiphany. Tricia, how do you find peace? How do you find solace at times, especially when it seems like the world has gone mad?
I think it's so important that we give ourselves grace. So, at the end of the day, why is it so difficult for people to show any grace for someone else? I really have to think that finger points right back at ourselves. So this past year, I think the more grace we can show for ourselves in giving ourselves that moment of reflection, and for goodness sake, I don't care how small the victory, celebrate it. And again, and I know, I always love talking about community, but you need that group that energizes you. You need the people you go to, that you have that, however tiny, even if it's just not failing, that you can celebrate that success together, do the high five, and truly give yourself the grace, that moment to just be calm in your own space and not judgmental of yourself. Literally, if you're giving yourself the objective, and I think this is another really important concept, is the noble mission. What's your mission? And that makes it a lot easier to give yourself grace because you're reaching for something that's really, really important. It goes beyond, just you. So take the breath, but then align on the grace for yourself that you're taking on something really important. And that's going to require a little bit of self-care here and there.
I feel very calm just listening to you. Well, Tricia, I know you want to extend and continue talking about community. So your 5-minute segment begins now.
Thank you so much, Joseph. My title is Chief Community Officer in C-Suite Network. And I'll never forget, a few years ago, we took on the Hero Club. We acquired the Hero Club. Rob Ryan built the business that Ascend Communications to over $20 billion. And he profit shared with every single employee. So he made more millionaires in one exchange than ever had been done in history. And needless to say, everywhere he went, he was called a hero. This ties so completely into our approach in C-Suite of being a values-based, values-driven business that supports other leaders like yourself, Joseph, who genuinely care about the impact they have. So I think in terms of how we build community for like-minded business leaders, the real connection, whether it's digital or in person, it really honestly doesn't matter. And at the end of the day, that community is just the same. You're building a sense of family where everyone in that community understands they're part of a mission that matters, they matter, and the input and the maximum empowerment of what they do that's exceptional is absolutely in critical alignment with everyone succeeding together. So in terms of community, I cannot tell you how passionate and how excited I am that the original insight I had with Hero Club that, oh my goodness, leading a club or a group of values-aligned CEOs, founders, investors is no different than building an exceptional team, which is no different than an exceptional family. And then fast forward to COVID, just 3-4 years later, building an entire network of executives, influencers, CEOs, investors, and so on. Exactly the same thing. It's an enormous family that's celebrating the successes together, enabling and empowering each other to do greater things than we ever thought possible individually. And then also being there when maybe the chips are a little bit down and we do need to give ourselves grace and support each other. So that sense of community, the energy we put out there, the energy we get back, and how we strive forward, I think is really important. And one other thing, this week was really exceptional in the C-suite, where we had a great catch-up conversation with Keith Krach. Now, Keith Krach brought Ariba public in the billions. He brought DocuSign public in the billions as the chairman and CEO of both organizations. And then he just was the Undersecretary of State. He's an exceptional human being, exceptional leader. And he said, we need to enable ourselves and align everyone around the noble cause. And he said, we also need to identify who's the common enemy. And there are just some really phenomenal concepts that I think we really need to be thinking about constantly. And then how do we connect everybody in? What's the hope? What's the purpose? What's the meaning that we're all driving together in terms of the impact we can have with great businesses in our case? So that's what I have that I've really been so honored and so excited to see. And you know, we've had a lot of conversations about what last year meant to us. For me, I just feel so galvanized by last year and so excited about what we're building, how we're building it, and the impact we can have even faster than we ever imagined with the enablement that we have with technology, having COVID change our lives overnight.
So Scott, do you want to say it, or should I say it? When we think about the common enemy, do you want to? Should we time the word Ted Cruz at the same time? Sorry, I couldn't resist. I could not resist it. I apologize. It was a moment of weakness. But yeah, Tricia, you know what I loved about it? There was almost like a community masterclass in under 5 minutes. Team, family, community, network. All words used interchangeably, whether it is internal or external, whether it's people that you pay a salary to or pay a salary to you. But ultimately, it always has to come, it comes down to the ultimate equation that makes no sense. 1 + 1 = 3, right? Together, we can do things that individually and by ourselves, we wouldn't have a hope of achieving. I mean, Aaron, you may as well, your middle name may as well be community. You've always, every interaction we've had, you are someone who just naturally, organically fosters a sense of community, and people gravitate towards you as this community leader that doesn't necessarily stand out in front, has no desire to be out in front. You're somewhere in the middle, but you are the glue that brings people together.
Well, I thank you for saying that. It is something that I've concentrated on and have made an effort, and I would look at it as one of the things that hopefully is one of my superpowers. And it's funny, as I was listening to this conversation, you know, about in some ways what's old is new. One of the first companies that I was working for after Fidelity Investments was called Shared Insights, and then later Mazinga. Many of you sort of had a role in speaking at or attending parties. And one of the things that Barry Liebert, who was the CEO and founder, had as a premise was to bring online and offline communities together. And at that time, it was maybe a little bit premature, and people weren't as familiar as we are today, as we all live in the Zoom box. But it is funny, back to like the hybrid events comment, which I agree with, back to, you know, Tricia talking about community and the importance of, and I've always joked, I collect people, right? I have way more people than I can keep track of, but it's always helpful, right, to have those people, whether it's crowdsourcing TV show ideas, getting speakers, speakers for events, tapping people in your network. Like I love Dave's comment about, you know, the follow-up and the catch-up. And, you know, one little comment to that, I think I have a high school friend that posted on LinkedIn the other day and said, help, I've never been on this. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I lost my job. Can you help me? And it's like, all of us, I'm sure, feel a little bit bad, but like now's not the time. You should have been thinking about this before you lost your job. You should have been networking. We should always all be networking all the time and trying to add value, which is really the critical piece is, you know, and I think everyone on this call, likes to put money in the bank ahead of time so that if you do need a favor, it's not, hey, I know we haven't talked in 5 years, but can you help me? It's wow, you're really helpful to me all the time and you do good things. And so if you do have a favor, I'd be glad to do that.
Really interesting, by the way. I don't know if you saw the comments. Adam Zan said Mazinga Barbecue lives. Aaron Strout and Scott Monty are influencers. I'm having horrible flashbacks to Salt Lick that apparently make an amazing peach cobbler, coleslaw.
And pickles. Don't forget the pickles.
And pickles.
Aaron, the last... I was going to say... Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I feel the improv side is about to take over.
No, I was just going to say the last time I think I saw Aaron was eating barbecue at the Iron Gate across from the convention center in Austin.
Yeah, that was a long time ago, but I remember it. Yep.
So what I was going to say, this is an idea that I just want to birth and say that we should think about this. The concept of a community bank, right? You deposit, you withdraw, and when times are tough, you can actually draw from the equity that is in your community bank. That is attributed to Aaron Strout. That it really made me think of it as a very rich metaphor and something for us to think about. Because when the chips are down, you need to make sure that you have a positive balance in your community bank.
Well, Joe, it's like the famous 1946 movie, It's a Wonderful Life. Right, Jimmy Stewart is running the building and loan, and he's out of money. And what does the community do? They rally around him, and people bring in bags and bags of money because they hear this guy who has given so much to his community, and they want to help him out when times are tough. Not so for Mr. Potter, right? Happy New Year to you in jail. That guy wouldn't help a single person, and there wouldn't be a single person who went out of their way to help him. And it absolutely pays dividends.
This is the essence of networking nicely, right? It's all about providing value to other people first and foremost before ever asking for anything in return, and maybe never asking for anything in return. The whole point is to provide value and to serve your community and to help others. So that's the essence of networking nicely.
Totally. Well, that's all we have time for today. Just kidding, Aaron.
Joseph,
yes.
Can I just add in? I think it's so important. One thing we're not saying out loud, but it's sort of that elephant in the room, is community traditionally has meant people like me, where I live, where I do what I do, and essentially very little diversity. And one thing that's so powerful and so important about what we're doing right now is the investment in being parts of different communities, of inviting others into our communities. And so the power of what we're talking about now is communities that align on values, not the traditional lines and boundaries like the old gentlemen's clubs, right? This is a very exciting time to open up to new ideas, new communities, new opportunities. And so I just want to put that out there. I know that could be a whole other mini show.
Listen, let's take that over to a clubhouse. But another word for community is the word Gemba. Actually, it is not another word for community, but it's a segue into the final Corona Bite from Mr. Mark Schaefer.
You just have to be aware of how the world works and how the world creates momentum. One of the things that we have to think about is that initial advantage, where these doors are opening all around us all the time. Part of this idea is Gemba. If you really want to learn, experience, and get inspired, you have got to physically go there. You have to look around, talk to people, experience it, because things will come together for you that you never understood before. Starbucks was started this way. Home Depot was started this way. People saw, they were walking around, saw something that didn't make sense, and it started, an entire company.
It's what Tim Ferriss did. He meticulously accounted for every success and generally failure, so that he observed and he learned. And we're talking about conferences again, right? Observing. Aaron, you get to bring us home. Your segment begins now.
Awesome. Well, truth be told, I had never heard of the concept of Gemba, so I looked it up. and saw that it's a Japanese word meaning the actual place. But I think the way Mark and you were referring to it is, in lean practices, Gemba refers to the place where value is created. And it got me doing a little bit of researching, and I found a blog post that Mark wrote last year, and this really struck me. He said, I once had the opportunity to meet and interview the great writer and historian Walter Isaacson. He's written books on his favorite geniuses, Steve Jobs, Albert Einstein, Leonardo da Vinci. And I asked him about his definition of genius. He said that genius requires two things, an endless curiosity and an ability to see patterns. And I loved that concept. And I think that and all of the things that we've been talking about today are going to roll into what my topic is. And that is South by Southwest. And I know that it's probably easy to lean into that, but South by Southwest Virtual is coming up. And so I want to talk a little bit about past and present and then future. Lots of fond memories. The first time I attended South by Southwest was in 2008. There was a Gary V wine party, which is where I met all these nerds that I had been talking to on this, recently launched platform called Twitter. We had the Mashable Lounge that year. I think Laura Fitton was the one that was in charge and a few others. So meeting Pete Cashmore, very cool. Still remember this dinner that we did, and this is a little bit sad for me because many of you know Liz Strauss, and she passed away last year, but it was with Liz, Chris Brogan, Rick Calvert, who many of you know, Sheila Scarborough, Becky McRae, Jim Storer, and me. And that was at Stubbs, right? And that really felt special that I was meeting and sort of hanging out with these people that were creating content. Jim Storer and I did a podcast at the Iron Cactus. Scott, I think you were one of the guests, as was Mr. Scoble and, many others. We did it for probably like 3 or 4 hours, and we were a little buzzed by the time we were done, but it was an amazing time. And then All Hat, I think all of us have been at All Hat, like David Armano and Richard Binhammer made this amazing community live event that we all made a point of attending. And then Scott, I don't know if you remember, but this was not too long after you had your job at Ford. All of us were incredibly impressed that you had access to the CEO and this Fortune 10 company and were changing things. And you and I sort of hung out late night, and we bumped into Pete Cashmore and his girlfriend at a bar, and just sort of, we're hanging around, walking around Austin that night. And I still remember doing that. I'd be remiss, Joe, if I didn't talk about our night in the rickshaw, which I don't think I've ever laughed harder. It was after a very long South by Southwest.
I'm still laughing.
Brian Posehn, we had an event powered. A lot of folks, maybe some of you attended, but it roasted Joseph Jaffe, and it was also one of the hardest I've ever laughed. And then one of the sort of other memories, and then I'd love to talk a little bit about what we've got going on, is doing a Geek-A-Q at Stubbs and having 1,400 of our closest friends show up. We knew at that point we sort of had arrived, and at the same time we had jumped the shark, right? We had probably too many community members at this one location listening to bands, eating good barbecue. So I'll pause for a second before I jump into the others, but I felt like this was a good, with the homecoming theme, the community theme, Texas under siege right now. Those are fonder moments of Texas when it's not, negative 1 degree and snow and no energy or water. So,
yeah, I mean those memories as well. I mean, I've never laughed so hard in my life as well, and also seeing the joy in you laughing at me with Brian Posehn. I don't think I've ever seen you laugh more than that, but good times, good memories.
Yeah, and so for those that don't know, Brian Posehn, he's a comedian. He was on the show Just Shoot Me and has been on a few others. And just a fun fact, we had an option of him or Zach Galifianakis. I don't know if you've heard that name before. Zach, unfortunately, was like 3 days off from being able to come to South by, so we had to settle for Brian. I'm still a little bit disappointed, but it was a lot of fun. Just looking forward, so for those that don't know, South by is virtual this year. We are at W2O very committed to bringing great content and music and a little meditation. And we've already started to record a lot of our sessions because South by is pre-requiring a lot of the official sessions to be recorded in advance. They're 25 minutes versus the hour long, so not quite the same. No barbecue this year, unfortunately, but we were fortunate enough to get Dr. Osterholm, who's on CNN regularly. He did a keynote with Jane Sorensen-Kahn talking about the last mile, last inch in terms of vaccine distribution. We had some of our clients from GSK, Otsuka, Samita Vant talking about patient advocacy. I was very proud of the fact that it was 3 Black women and an Asian woman, so really bringing diversity to the forefront. We have a very cool session that we're going to be talking about data and sort of healthcare professionals and social and how that's sort of evolved with the head of health at Twitter, our own chief data officer, and a gentleman named Dr. Austin, who's incredibly social. And then other topics like diversity in clinical trials and inclusion. We have Dr. Esther Chu, also on CNN, regularly the CEO of PanCan, music, meditation, so much fun. So we hope you all can tune in. We have a media lounge that is officially part of South by Southwest. The nice thing is you don't actually need a badge. So if you want to join in, just keep an eye open from either my Twitter handle or some of our South by or W2O communications. But not the same, as we had said, we can't be in person, we can't physically network. We're going to try our best to replicate that goodness and a mix of big picture thought leadership and then some of the intimacy that comes with some of those private conversations.
I want you to talk to me. I would have helped you get Dr. Detroit.
Well, it's not too late, Scott. So
awesome.
Yes, not too late.
I believe he may be joining us in the Clubhouse room. How's that for a little segue into our after show? But here's what I am going to do. I'm going to open up the room as we wind down here. Let me do that because it's 1 p.m. And then what we're going to do is, there we go. So I'm just going to start the room, and as people come in, I'll let them know. Scott, in your newsletter, and I posted a link to that newsletter earlier in the show, you provide this quote: "Clubs happen because of the elementary truth that we like to be with our own kind, with whom we can be ourselves and let our hair down." To Tricia's point, what we're finding out in Clubhouse is that our own kind may just be humanity. And it may be people that actually aren't exactly like us, but are like us in terms of wanting the same things, caring about the same things, hurting from the same things, longing for the same things as well, belonging, connection, and ultimately to do more to further humanity. So we won't get into Corona questions. I think we'll just move on over to the after show. I think this was a deeply meaningful and profound episode. I want to thank you guys so much. You're going to come over to Clubhouse as well, but of course, Chuck Norris gets to always have the final word and determine. I don't even know if some of you saw new Chuck Norris. Did you ever have Chuck Norris respond to you, Dave? Because you were early on in the process.
I have not. No, I have not.
All right. Well, let's see what he thought of you. So here he is.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
So he liked you. All right. Well, let's head on to the after show. Thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. This was an amazing, amazing episode.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Thank you for watching Corona TV with your host, multiple author and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. Corona TV is the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing. The after show on Zoom starts right now at bit.ly/Corona TV After Show. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show at coronatv.show. And if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, text Corona TV to 66866 or visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.